Welcome to Book Banter with me, your host, Diane Burkhart. I hope you will join me every Wednesday as we explore all things to do with, well, books. Let's get on with our show today. Hello, my happy people. Today is May 21st, 2025, and of course, we have a great show for you. I have to admit, today's episode was just a nightmare to try to edit. And the reason for that is my guest and I just had such a long, comfortable conversation that I had twice as much of a recording as I needed for today's episode. So it was so hard for me to decide what to cut out and what to leave because there was so much great material. What I may have to do, since I always keep my original tracks, I may have to maybe during the holiday hiatus re-edit and bring some of the stuff that I had to cut out today to you then, because it was just such a wonderful episode. We just had a great time, and I think you're going to definitely hear that in what actually made it into the show today. But let's not spend too much time on all of this. I will have to tell you, though, I do have a little bit of a disclaimer for this episode today because we do get into a lot of sensitive topics, and I want to make sure that everyone understands that nothing in this episode should be taken as medical or addiction recovery advice. If you or a loved one is struggling with your physical or mental health, please seek out qualified personalized medical advice with a certified practitioner. Now, I should also mention that to try and protect our episode from being censored by some of our streaming services, there are 3 words which are bleeped, which you can find listed in the description of today's podcast. You will notice I usually use an exclamation point instead of an I in those words, just to make sure that even the written words aren't being tagged to possibly end up getting our show censored and not airing in some areas. And for the last little bit, we do have a trigger warning because we do talk about when somebody does unalive themselves. We talk about people who are dealing with substance abuse. And we also talk about other books and TV shows that do involve people unaliving other people. But there we go. Now that we have all that business out of the way, please sit back and relax and welcome my guest today. You are really going to enjoy the information that this man has. It was such a fantastic interview. Please welcome to Book Banter with Diane Burkhart, Chaplain Patrick Day. The way that I always like to start these episodes is to just have our guest explain who you are and what you do.
Well, given we're on a show called Book Banter, let's start off that my name is Patrick Day, and I've written 9 books. 5 of them are fiction, and 4 of them are what I call my jail books. I'm a chaplain as a second career. My first career was in a 2-year college where I ended up as a dean of instruction, took an early retirement, and got into writing. We're probably going to talk more about that later on, but I got into writing because of a horrible stint with depression. But anyhow, I've visited jails and addiction centers throughout Minnesota, and a friend of mine who's a pastor, I actually helped get him his pastorate job, asked if I just blow in and blow out of jails with a presentation or if I leave something behind. Well, as it ended up, I was blowing in and out of presentations. And he said, you really need to leave something behind. Well, that led me to start a ministry called True Hope Ministry to raise money to finance bringing books with me in every presentation. And I really couldn't find a good book to bring, so I wrote 4 of my own. And then I sold them to the ministry at cost, so I didn't make a dime. Now, the first book I wrote, for going into the jails really had a catchy title. It was called How to Stay Out of Jail.
That seems appropriate.
Yes, very appropriate. And the funny thing is, I established a relationship with program directors in the jails throughout Minnesota. And when I would call up, they'd say, "Oh, you're the How to Stay Out of Jail guy." I said, "Yep, that's me." So I would visit the same jails once a year. And some of the jails were so big, like in a town near Minneapolis, that they didn't mix different units. So I
Mhm.
gave 4 presentations over 2 different days. Anyhow, the reason I'm telling you and the audience about my jail ministry is that's where I met with hundreds of addicts for long periods of time. I was the chaplain in the local county jail, and I would meet with individuals sometimes for up to a year, every week for up to a year. I never talked to someone for less than a half an hour. And there was one person, because of lockdown time, that I would speak to for an hour and a half every Monday. And then I presented to thousands of people in Adult and Teen Challenge. Are you familiar with Adult and Teen Challenge?
I am not.
Okay, it's a Christian rehab center in Minnesota and throughout the United States, actually throughout the world. And you go in there for 13 months, and the success rate is quite extensive. Anyhow, my message all the time is one of hope, because that's what these folks wanted to hear, because their lives are hopeless. And I know for myself what it means to be hopeless, because I went through nearly 5 years of depression. Anyhow, that leads me to the book we're going to talk about today, mainly Finding the Safest Place on Earth. It's my 9th book, and I believe it's, in my humble opinion, it's my best book. I had a friend of mine who's a publisher read the book and say it's a great story and really like the cover of the book.
Before we go on about your books, I want to go ahead and back up just a little bit here, because not only do you have all of this experience in your ministry, but you also have a master's degree in English literature and another one in reading. I didn't even know there was a master's in reading.
That was an interesting one. I got the master's degree. I started it at the University of Arkansas, where I had an assistantship. I taught freshman English there. And then that's when the Vietnam War was raging. So I left there to join a National Guard unit. And then I finished my master's degree at the University of Minnesota. So I started teaching. I tried to get into college, and they were letting people go in colleges, much less hiring them. So I got a job teaching in a middle school in a Catholic school near Minneapolis. And I was supposed to be teaching English and history. And lo and behold, they had me teaching reading. I didn't know how to teach reading, so I started a program at St. Thomas University in St. Paul. I got my tuition for half off. It was a Catholic university. I was teaching in a Catholic school. And so that's how I ended up with the degree of reading. And that's actually what got me into the technical college system in a city west of Minneapolis called Wilmer. So I was a reading teacher working with people who were disadvantaged, a lot of single parents, people who had been out of school for a long time, or people that had disabilities. Not so much the physical disabilities, but people who had learning disabilities in reading. A lot of those. I was only able to get that job because I had the master's degree in reading. And that just totally changed my life around, got me into education, and it gives me a background. You know, a master's degree in English and in reading is a good background if you want to be a writer.
Oh, definitely.
I forgot to mention that in our area, that I was the head of our area. It was a learning center, and English as a second language was an important feature. We were getting people coming over from Vietnam, from Cambodia, from Thailand, and we had a very heavy Hispanic population in Wilmer. You knew that you were making a difference when you helped a person get an education.
Oh, yeah. When I was in college, I was a volunteer at a grade school and was a reading tutor. And I worked with a lot of kids who had learning disabilities and a lot who had English as a second language. And whenever you see a kid who's struggling to be able to read just a single paragraph without a bunch of mistakes, and when they finally do it and they get so excited and even hug you and they're so happy and so proud, nothing beats that moment.
That's right. I've got a philosophy that life is most meaningful when you're doing things that are really essential.
Mm-hmm.
For example, farmers. They don't make a lot of money, but it's very fulfilling life because they're dealing with one of the essentials, which is food.
Mm-hmm.
And teaching is another essential, education. So you're right in the heart of what matters in life, what makes a difference in life.
So now, where did the advertising copywriter job work in?
Well, I was advertising copywriter at a company in Minneapolis called MTS Systems Corporation. They made testing equipment, and I became advertising manager there. Then I went to work for a company called Pillsbury Refrigerator. They're the ones that make the Pillsbury dough,
Mm-hmm.
and I worked there as customer service manager. I'll eventually get to your question, a little sidebar, because there's an interesting story here.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked as a national customer service manager, and there is no creativity to it. So my English degree, my reading degree, the advertising copywriting, I was solving people's problems. They missed a shipment. They were having delivery problems. They're having problems with the customer.
Mm-hmm.
I disliked that job so much that I hated Fridays. Now, only someone who really hates a job that much understands why I would hate Friday. Monday was only 2 days away. So I spent the weekends dreading Monday. My favorite day was Wednesday. Then I knew I was coming to the end of a week. But when I came to the end of the week, I was just miserable because Monday was coming. So I left there, and that's when I started teaching in the Catholic school. That's when I finished my master's degree in English. And that's when I got into the advertising copywriting. So my life has had writing in it someplace along the line. Then after I left the Catholic school, I was there for 3 years teaching English, history, and reading. Then I went into the technical college job in teaching reading. And then on the side, I worked for a printing company that did brochures, and I would write the brochures. So I was an advertising copywriter. I was doing that part-time while I was teaching. So that's how I got into copywriting. And then it was about 10 years into my career as a reading instructor that I was doing so much work for them that I took a leave of absence. And I started an advertising agency within that printing company. And I worked with a person named Myron, who had become a friend of mine, who is an artist and illustrator. And so advertising and marketing has always been a sidelight. So I've been writing fairly steadily, full-time, part-time. And when I became the dean of instruction, that's when I started working for the advertising agency that I had started. But I was still responsible for all the outside communication at the college. So in one way or another, I was always involved in writing.
How did Pyramid Publishers come to be?
Well, there's an interesting story. I retired from that college. I took early retirement because I was able to do that. My wife was a teacher there. As a matter of fact, she was a teacher of English in the business department, and her supervisor was a person that she really loved. As a matter of fact, earlier, she loved this supervisor so much she married him, which was me. I supervised my own wife at the college. Fortunately, she was a very, very good teacher, and I never had any issues with her. Okay, so left the college and moved from Wilmer to Buffalo, Minnesota, which is a suburb of Minneapolis. And I had never worked for a job for 30 years before, and I had never left a town I'd lived in for 30 years before. So moved to Buffalo, and I supervised 35 technical programs, and over 100 people reported to me. Wow. So I moved from a job of 30 years and a city of 30 years at the same time, not knowing the devastation that would cause. All of a sudden, no one gave a rip what I had to say. And I went into a deep, deep depression that lasted for almost 5 years. And the way I came out of that depression was to find some meaning and purpose in my life again. Through a lot of prayer and asking God to lead me, I started writing a novel that had come into my mind like 20 years before that. It was called Too Late in the Afternoon. So I wrote that book, and that book, amongst other things, pulled me out of my depression. And as I was writing that book, I came to realize that the day I stopped writing and the day that I died would be the same day. So what am I going to do after I write a book? So I found there's a self-publishing company in Minneapolis that published my book, and I paid dearly for it. Mm-hmm. Then came time for my second book. It was a book on genealogy based on a person I was visiting in a nursing home. That was another part of my therapy to get out of depression, to do something for someone else. Mm-hmm. So I went into a nursing home. I said, who do you have here that doesn't have people visit him? And they said, Marv. So I started visiting Marv. He was into genealogy. So I started writing a book. You have a title of a book, so when people see the title, they'll know what it's about. So I came up with a really catchy title for a book that had to do with murders and genealogy. Mm-hmm. And it was called Murders and Genealogy in Hennepin County. And I came to realize, I think I can probably publish this myself. In the meantime, I was a business coach. I helped attorneys at a big law firm in a city called Fergus Falls. I was looking to form a company, Pyramid Publishers, an LLC, but how do you do that? You need an attorney. So they said that they would give me an LLC if I would work it off, working with their attorney clients who needed some coaching. And so that's how Pyramid Publishers started. And at first, the writing wasn't an issue, but I needed some help in the publishing business. So there's a company called Upwork that I used, and I hired people to tutor me in how to publish. I hired people to format books, and I hired people to do covers. So I was a one-man show, but I had a worldwide cadre of independent contractors. So I started that company, and I published my next 8 books myself through Pyramid Publishers. And then I had other people approach me, and they wondered if I could publish their books. So I've done 9 of my own books, and I've done about 30 books of other people through Pyramid Publishers. But mainly what I do is I provide publishing services.
Looking at your website, it says that you can actually go one of 3 routes with your service: the traditional publishing route, or hybrid, or just a publishing coach.
Yes. And I've kind of revised that a little bit. I've got to check that site. But traditional publishing is I do everything, including the marketing. Mm-hmm. But the marketing is something, because of my background in advertising, I could do, but I don't have the time to add that on. So I have to hire that out. So for a traditional publisher, I totally back a book and pay a royalty to the author. Then the second one, the hybrid one, is where I cover all the costs of the publishing, all the formatting, all the cover design, all the editing, which I do or hire someone to do. And then the author, for example, the one I'm doing the bipolar book on, is a podcaster, and he knows how to market himself. Mm-hmm. So he'll be responsible for the marketing. I do everything else, and then we split the profits 50-50. Then the business coach, the printing coach, is more now what I call publishing services. So someone comes to me, and these vanity presses that are out there, I don't know if you've run across them, Diane. I expect you have.
Oh, yeah.
They will publish your book, and they will do wonderful, and you'll be a bestseller. And it's only going to cost you $3,000, and they'll make you a star.
Yeah.
all they want is your $3,000,
Mm-hmm.
and they generally don't deliver. And so vanity presses really have a bad name. So I'm not a vanity press. I provide publishing services. So if someone comes to me, I'll format their book, I'll do a cover for them, I'll take care of all the publishing business, I'll even help them get their own website, and I will use publishers like Ingram Spark and KDP, which is an arm of Amazon, and I've got accounts in those. So I'll publish a book through that, and then I'll turn the KDP. I'll help them start their own site, or I'll help them start an Ingram Spark or Lulu or Book Baby or whatever they want, so that they have control of the book. So it's a lot different. It's called publishing services.
One thing that I really like about this too is it shows that you have a free initial consultation. So people can come to you and have a meeting and discuss all of this and then go decide if they want to do it this way or not. Where so many places, they're like, no, you have to buy the service.
Yes. The thing is, Diane, is that I retired from a very good job, high-level job, and I have a teacher's retirement through them. My wife has a teacher's retirement. I do books, not to buy fancy cars and go on vacations to Greece. I publish books because I really like publishing books.
Mm-hmm.
And my office is in my home, and so I don't have a lot of overhead. I pick and choose. Someone will say, will you publish my book? I'll say, what's it about? I do books that interest me. I'm doing a book right now for a woman, and she's writing a pregnancy cookbook.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so she's got different recipes, some that are healthy, some are decadent, but she's paying me about $600 to publish her book. And I've spent so much time on her book because I enjoy working with her,
Mm-hmm.
that I'm probably making minimum wage on that book. Every person whose book I've done has become a friend of mine.
That's always nice.
Yeah, so I not only have an initial consultation, as you say, but there's close communication throughout the whole procedure of publishing a book. I don't just take a job, do an interior format, then say, here it is. All along the way, I'm saying, what kind of a font would you like? Well, they don't know anything about fonts.
Sorry, I'm laughing over here because I'm one of those nerds. I worked in advertising long enough and graphic design that when I go to movies, I can sit there and tell you what fonts are scrolling on the screen.
Well, they don't know anything about fonts. So I'm saying, you want something that's modern, you want something that's classic, you want something that's bold, something that's frivolous, then I'll choose a font based on what they want. The thing about fonts is if you're listening and you don't know what a font is, don't worry. If I'm doing a book for you, you'll find out. I'll teach you about fonts and help you find one that would be just right for you.
Now, I know in 2005, you started your jail ministry. Was this what actually got you to writing more on addiction?
Yes. Well, you've opened up a whole new discussion. I became a Gideon. I don't know if you know what a Gideon is. We're the one that bring Bibles into hotels and doctor's offices and such. So I became a Gideon, and when you become a Gideon, they like you to have a particular focus. Some people speak in churches to get donations. Well, I didn't want to do that. And so they said, well, we need someone to go into the jails on Sundays. I said, okay, I'll do that. So I started going into the jails. I found that tremendously rewarding. Gradually, I started meeting with the inmates during the week. And as that grew, I was starting to write my books. And I got a hold of a church affiliation in Springfield, Illinois, and asked if they might be interested in buying my book for their jail and prison ministry. And they said, well, no, because you have no standing in our church. I wasn't a member of the church. I wasn't clergy. I wasn't anything.
Mm-hmm.
So the person I talked to said, we're starting a new program called an associate chaplain. Maybe you'd be interested in that. I said, okay. And so I became a credentialed chaplain with that church affiliation. And I had the jail ministry that I was already doing. Then I took some courses. I had to get recommendations. So I became an associate chaplain. Now I could come into the jail and it was sign up to see the chaplain. Now here's some statistics for you, Diane. I've met with both men and women.
Mm-hmm.
What percentage of men that I would be meeting with, and it's pretty traditionally, this is the way it is throughout the jails in the United States, what percent are in jail because of using drugs, selling drugs, distributing drugs, or they've done something based on their drug use? What percent do you think that might be in the jails?
I would assume that it would be extremely high, like in the 90s.
Yep, 90%. 90% for the men. You know what it is for the women? 95%.
Yeah.
The women are in there primarily because of drugs. So all of a sudden, I'm dealing with addicts. And addiction, they are hugely difficult to escape from.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons why is because people who have addictions have what's called an addictive personality. You know, I've got an addictive personality. It was very difficult for me to quit smoking. And I didn't smoke for 5 years. Then I was having some difficulties, and I was with someone who offered me a cigarette, and I figured I deserve a cigarette. So I had a cigarette.
And the thought is always, one won't hurt.
One won't hurt. And then I asked for a second one. You know, no big deal. Do you know how many cigarettes I had the next day?
A pack?
Yep, it was a pack. That's an addictive personality.
Yeah.
So someone who's drinking and they're in jail, they can't drink. They're in there for a year. They don't drink for a year. They come out. They're going to be clean. They're going to lead a righteous life. And then they figured, oh, a glass of wine won't hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Later on, it's a second glass of wine. And then, boom,
Yeah.
it's in the leaders. So what I found that was very important, and we're eventually going to be talking about my book, Finding the Safest Place on Earth. What I found that was very important was a faith-based approach to addiction. And that's where Adult and Teen Challenge comes in. It's a faith-based. Person goes in there for 13 months. It's the Alcoholics Anonymous.
Mm-hmm.
There's 12 rules within Alcoholics Anonymous, and one of them is the higher source, that you cannot overcome an addiction on your own. You need to depend on a higher source. For me, I'm a Christian chaplain, and so for me, the higher source was Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I would talk about to the inmates, both in presentations I did at Adult and Teen Challenge. That was the important thing, being faith-based. And most of the people who met with me were Christians because they knew I was a chaplain, so they knew what they were going to get.
Mm-hmm.
They were going to get a Christian message. And the second one was having a mentor.
Yeah.
And that is what the book, Finding the Safest Place on Earth, is about. It's about a person who's an addict, and he claims he's a Christian. He thinks he's a Christian, but then he's not so sure because of his heavy drinking, and he can't overcome it. He'll go for a while, promise his wife he'll never drink again. Then he does, and it's just that cycle over and over and over again. So he's not able to do it on his own. So he needs a Christian foundation, and he needs a mentor. And the mentor is a guy named Manny. And that's kind of his mission, is to work with addicts. He had been a cocaine addict years earlier. He works alongside Jack, kind of like the Holy Spirit. He walks with him and helps him. And when Jack falls, he lifts him up. And he gradually gives Jack the tools until the end of the book when Jack has a major oops and tries to commit suicide, and Manny rescues him again, and then he teaches him the final lesson that will help him stay sober for the rest of his life. You know what that final lesson is, Diane?
What?
Well, we really don't have time today to talk about it. You can read the book and you'll find out what the final lesson is.
So I was looking at your listing on Amazon, and there's not a lot of reviews on there, but the ones that you have are fantastic. So many people are saying a thought-provoking read, compassionate and to the point, very informative and uplifting book. It's very positive for everything that people are writing on here about your book.
Yes, I've now retired from the chaplaincy, but that was a book that I would bring into the jails and adult and teen challenge with me. By the way, the picture in the book is Jesus asleep in a boat. It's out of Mark 4, and the boat's going down, and the apostles are just terrified. The fact of the matter is, they're in the safest place they can possibly be. So the book, The Safest Place on Earth, the safest place on earth is as close to Jesus as you can get.
See, and I was going to mention, I do really love this cover. It's a very powerful image.
Yes, you may end up cutting this out, Diane, but this friend of mine, this publisher, is a very devout Christian.
Mm-hmm.
This is a guy that I've never heard him swear, but when he saw that cover, being in the publishing business, he used the vernacular of the publishing business. He said, Pat, he said, that's a kick-ass cover.
I agree. Now seems like a good time to do our 5 quick questions that never turn out to be quick, but I hold out eternal hope that it will happen one day. Are you ready?
Okay, I'm ready with a little anticipation.
These are just fun. So, question 1. What is your favorite TV show or movie that you can watch over and over again and never get tired of it?
Okay, I actually have the answer to that one.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I've done as a Christian, I don't watch movies or TV shows that Jesus wouldn't sit down and watch them with me.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite show is Jesus's favorite show is NCIS. They actually don't show anything gory. When someone gets killed, they show them after.
Yeah.
But it's a clean show, and people dress well, they talk well, there's rarely any innuendo. I also found that Jesus really likes to watch golf. He especially likes the major tournaments, like the Masters coming up. And so he watches golf with me anytime.
Question 2. Do you have a personal motto for life?
I have a number of Bible verses that I've got, but I won't get into them because some of the listeners to your show may be more secular. But here's the one that, it has been a motto. And I found people that say, I really like that. And it's not anything revolutionary. As a matter of fact, it's used all the time. Mm-hmm. And that motto is, it is what it is.
Yeah.
So with that motto, when something happens, instead of saying, why did this happen? Or how am I going to deal with this? Or this doesn't feel fair? Or this is the political atmosphere and I like it or I hate it. And my answer is, it is what it is. Mm-hmm. And that gets me through a lot. And that was very important for me as I started coming out of depression.
My motto that I usually use came to me whenever I was going through all my brain surgeries. And that was a quote by Winston Churchill that he said during World War II. When you're going through hell, keep going.
Yes, that's a great one. And especially with your story, Diane.
Question 3. What is your favorite type of cuisine?
My granddaughter is kind of amazed by this. Actually, my favorite food is raspberries. I love raspberries. I have raspberry malts. I have raspberry ice cream, raspberry pie. There's a restaurant in Minneapolis that makes raspberry pie with only raspberries. It's in downtown Minneapolis. It's called Murray's. And I love to go there to have their raspberry pie.
I love the flavor of raspberries, but the seeds are such a problem.
Well, they are, but there's a place in not too far from where I live. It's in a small town called Delano, and there's a place called the Peppermint Twist, and they are famous for their raspberry malts.
That sounds so good.
It's about 15 minutes away, yeah. So my wife will be sitting around saying, "What should we do? Let's go to Delano and get a raspberry malt." And off we go.
So, question 4, what would be your perfect vacation?
Oh, I got the answer to that. My first name is Patrick. I am Irish. My favorite place to go is Ireland. I've been to Ireland. I started in 2016. I went to Ireland every year for 4 years, and then COVID hit.
Oh,
And then after COVID, I went one more time. So I've been to Ireland 5 times. I just love Ireland. So, favorite vacation, gonna go someplace, I'd go to Ireland.
it's definitely on my bucket list.
Yes, I've learned a little bit. The language of Ireland is not English. That is not their national language. Their national language is Irish, which is a Celtic language called Gaelic. The pronunciation is challenging. But over in Ireland, I don't go by Patrick. My name over there is Padraig, which looks like Podrick, but it's not. It's Porrig.
Mm-hmm.
In Dublin, it's Porrig. In Cork, which is the south part of Ireland, my name is Podrick. And on the Wild Atlantic Way in Galway, I'm Porrig again, yeah.
I love some of the spellings that they have for Irish names. I've actually interviewed a couple of authors from Ireland, and a few of them have a character called Aoife, and it's spelled Aoife. And I love that. Well, now your last question. Question 5. I've been asking this pretty much of everybody this season. When somebody asks you for a book recommendation, who is the first author that you mention?
It would depend on who the person was. One of the people that I would recommend would be C.S. Lewis, The Tales of Narnia. One of my favorite authors is a Christian author that C.S. Lewis read a lot about, George MacDonald. I have read every book that George MacDonald has written, and he's a very prolific writer. He's writes with a Scottish brogue. That's where I first came across the Gaelic, because Wales, Scotland, and Ireland, their language is all Celtic. So very similar language. If it's a person that's pretty secular, I recommend John Grisham, an author of legal thrillers. I've read every book he's ever written. And Michael Connelly. I've not read every single book he has, but a lot of them. And then another one I like is lled. He writes the Jack Reacher books.
Yeah, I like those.
Yeah.
I'm very big on detective kind of things and military. So now, why don't you go ahead and remind everybody who you are and where they can find your books?
I'm Patrick Day, and the name of the book is Finding the Safest Place on Earth. You can find it, all my books actually, you can find on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, any other online bookseller, but Amazon sells 90% of the books sold online. So I put a lot of effort into Amazon. If you went into a bookstore and you asked for my book, they wouldn't have it because my name is not John Grisham or Michael Connelly. But if you said, I'd really like to get this book named Finding the Safest Place on Earth, they'll look in their Ingram Wholesale Book Catalog. They'll look and say, okay, here it is. I'll order it for you. But Amazon is the prime one that I use. And you had mentioned the reviews. I've got 15 reviews. Reviews, being an author yourself, they're so difficult to get.
Yeah.
People read a book and they don't think about doing a review. People do reviews for Frigidaires, for gloves, hats, dresses, but people just don't do reviews for books.
I think for a lot of people, they don't know what they should write, and they don't seem to understand All you have to do is put in there, I like the book. That's all you have to do. You don't have to write a big paragraph. You don't have to get detailed, because just putting that review in there and clicking the stars that align with how you feel about the book, that puts our book ahead in the ratings. And if you get to about 50 on a book, then it jumps you up even further ahead. And like every 50, you get more exposure.
You know, Diane, I could have said just exactly what you said. First of all, just finding how to do a review on Amazon, but I make it easy. Have you ever heard of Bitly?
No.
Okay, Bitly is a software that I use, and if you go to Amazon, you look up my book, and then you find where it is review, and you click on review, and you'll have a long URL on the top bar of your computer. And that's the address of the reviews. So I take that whole thing, I put it in Bitly, and it turns it into, I just call it Safest Place Review. So it's bit.ly.safestplacereview. It's a link. You click on the link, and boom, you're right on the site of doing a review. Make it as easy as possible for someone. But I tell people, you don't have to put in a lot of work. A sentence or two is fine. I like the book is fine. Reviews are, and some of them, as you saw in there, they write longer reviews. They really like the book. But for the reviews, it's the numbers.
Yeah.
So I'm doing a relaunch of my book from the standpoint of putting more emphasis into getting reviews. And the thing is with Amazon, and rightly so, you can't pay for a review.
Yeah, that can actually get you booted off the site.
Oh, they'll throw you off. But you can offer free books, and you can ask for a review, but you can't ask for a good review. The fact of the matter is, having a bad review every once in a while is not awful.
Yeah. This has been absolutely fascinating. I cannot believe how much fun this has been today. I really cannot thank you enough for taking the time to do this interview.
And I've enjoyed it too, because, as we were talking, and when you were talking about reviews, I could have said it myself. I just had this sense that I'm talking to a kindred spirit.
Well, it seems like we do have an awful lot in common.
Yes.
So there you have it, folks. My interview with the incredible Chaplain Patrick Day. Now, if you go to search out his publishing services, make sure that you are getting the correct website. We do have a link in the description of today's podcast, but there are other indie publishing houses out there that have similar names that don't always have some great reviews. So make sure you're going to the right place. And if it does sound like you're interested in finding the safest place on earth, don't forget he does have other books that he has written. Go to Amazon.com and you can find everything that he has available in his published works. And of course, I have a link for that in the description of today's podcast too. I like to make things easy for you. Now, coming up next week, I will be talking with Jennifer Vito. We're going to be discussing the second book in her Gull Island series, Serenity by the Sea. If you like clean, wholesome romance, this is the author for you to check out. Her book, Serenity by the Sea, has won the Baltimore Magazine Best of Baltimore Readers' Poll Winner Award for 2024 and was also an honorable mention in the Baltimore Sun's Best of 2024 Reader's Choice Awards. So it sounds like she definitely has a winning series going on, so be sure and check her out. If you like clean, wholesome romance, you may have just found your next favorite author. I have been working very hard on finalizing all of the rest of the episodes for this season. I only have 2 more authors to talk to make sure that everything is set to go. And then I will be putting up a listing that shows you all of the authors who are coming up for the rest of season 4. That's right. Everything is completely booked out. It took me a while to get all of the connections made and all of the media packages gathered. But I think I've just about got everything set, and hopefully by the middle of June, I will have the entire list of authors coming up for the rest of the season available at burkhartbooks.com/podcast. I also need to get to work on uploading everything from season 3 into our podcast archives so that you will be able to always find our show's episodes no matter what happens with this podcast in the future, because you never know what's going to happen in life. So just to be safe, I want to make sure that we have all of our shows archived and available so that you can find these fantastic authors that I have met over the last 4 seasons forever on our website. And of course, I'm working on putting up the back issues of Book Banter magazine into print so that you can buy them off of Amazon. I'm also looking at how to get them on the website for sale. I'm also checking out everything that I need to try and put my own flipbook magazine that I'm creating with apps that I buy on our website so that we can go forward with more future magazines available in electronic form, and then also putting more up for sale on Amazon in print form. And I'm still trying to write my own books. Yeah, there's just a lot to do. So I need to get busy and get back to work. So you know what time it is, folks. It is time for you all to go forth and be really happy that we have got so much great content coming for you.